So at the core of what we are doing is to raise general awareness across the whole of society about the importance of soil. We also have a strategy on biodiversity. My colleagues from the Commission services are actually here today in this meeting. And also there, you'll find that soil is lacking. Okay? It's not being considered. So our goal is to try and push the value of soil and soil biodiversity into these two parallel activities. And actually my job is to provide EU policies with a scientific base, specifically on soils, and that's what we try to do. So in 2010 we produced this. This is a European atlas on soil biodiversity. And this was a first attempt to bring all the information together from the scientific body of evidence and present it in a way that people could understand and take out the clear messages about the diversity of the organisms and what they do. Subsequently, we have the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. And actually, FAO have launched something called the Global Soil Partnership. And there also awareness raising for policy and the public is a key issue. So there's a lot of drivers to try and make soil biodiversity more accessible to society as a whole. So here we are. It's taken us about 3 years. Actually, it's taken a bit more than 3 years, I think. But it's taken 3 years since we had the first workshop in Fort Collins. Diana mentioned it briefly. We had an editorial board. We had 27 leading soil biodiversity scientists from across the planet. And they actually coordinated the contribution of information from a whole pool of experts, more than nearly 100 experts from all over the world, to develop this atlas. So we have 8 chapters in this atlas. Okay, the first chapter describes soil as a habitat. It's a very good introduction to soil if you want to have soil in 16 pages. It describes where soil comes from, what are the main soil forming factors, the pedogenic processes that then determine the specificity of soils. We also try and show the global distribution of soils to describe their broad characteristics and so on. So this basically gives you the underpinning habitat of why certain soils occur where they do. Then, more importantly, what you find in these soils. So we have a chapter that describes the diversity of soil organisms. And they're listed there. We start from the smallest and we work up in size. And we describe each of their specific characteristics. So for example, this is a page from the atlas. So we have a very clear text. The text is scientifically sound, okay, but it's not scientifically difficult to read. It's very easy to read. And we've been over and over and over it to make sure that it's easy to read. And throughout the atlas, we've tried to draw out key information, interesting fact boxes, things that you really need to know. If you only read this box in this page, you'll learn a lot. Okay, so that's the key message. So this is the structure that we have throughout the atlas. We have a chapter 3 that talks about the geographical and temporal distribution. It explains what you find where in relation to various ecoregions. Also, as Diana explained, to look at soil biodiversity within an urban context or within an agricultural context is very important. And most importantly, we tried for the first time to produce a map that shows the global distribution of soil biodiversity. Okay. Now this is a very unique map. It's developed on the basis of a global data set on bacteria and a global data set on macrofauna. So that gives you a broad distribution. And what's interesting is, okay, maybe you get some highlights in some tropical areas, but you also get high levels of biodiversity in temperate areas as well. So there's no clear relationship between what you see above ground and what you see below ground. So this is a reflection for the first time of the distribution of global soil biodiversity. But it's a first approximation. It's simply based on the information that we have now. We haven't included into here, for example, microfauna. Right? And that could change the distribution patterns of this. Also on soil-dwelling mammals. So for the whole future aspects of this work, we need to really collect and integrate all the data we have at a global level to improve this map. So the atlas then also describes the various ecosystem services and the functions that they provide. And we've already heard a little bit about these from various people this morning, how they relate to food and fiber production. They're used in biotechnology, nutrient cycle, and so on. And as a consequence, their value that they have for society. But also interesting, we also talk about the threats to the soil biodiversity. From above ground biodiversity, loss of above ground habitats, invasive species, pollution, overgrazing, and so on. They're all here. Eventually, we come up with this map that Diana touched upon. And again, it's a first approximation that we have for the potential threats to soil biodiversity. And it makes very interesting reading, actually. I was quite shocked when I saw that so much of the planet was red. I didn't expect to see certain parts coming up, maybe in the Far East, or maybe in the US. For Europe, we'd already done something like this for the first biodiversity atlas, so we were aware of the issue. But when you look at a global extent, but this is a map that uses a certain set of indicators or threats in terms of aridity, in terms of nutrient application, in terms of intensity of use, land cover change, and issues like this. But it's an approximation, so we now need to be able to sort of come down and to see whether this is true. So we need a very good ground-based assessment, a data collection program, better modeling to actually see that whether this is the case or whether it's worse. So we need to come to a next stage in the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, and I'll come on to that at the very end. We touched a little bit on interventions. The Atlas also tries to provide practical solutions. It gives indications of what can be done to manage the land in such a way as to enhance the biota community. And we try to give, as I said, practical examples of actions that can be taken to conserve, to preserve, and to enhance. But very importantly, actually, that the message that we try to give is that it's not just for farmers, it's also a broader societal issue. So even if you're living in a town or a city, there are some things that you can do also to maintain and to help the cause of protecting soil biodiversity. So it comes down to partly education, so the importance for soil and soil biodiversity at schools, in tertiary education, but also at a broader societal level. We also try to make the case that there should be increased research into soil biodiversity, but maybe to integrate the themes. I think there's a lot of people working on specific communities, and maybe not so much on biodiversity, actually, on the diversity of organisms. And within the Atlas, there's about 2 full pages of teaching resources, of suggestions for actions, of advice of things to do to help you drive forward these type of goals. So the Atlas concludes with some strong policy statements. It talks about advice. It talks very much about how to translate expert knowledge into a language that can be understood by citizens, by policymakers, and so on. And it also draws attention to something I mentioned before, towards the need for a better assessment at global scale, a more integrated assessment. There's a lot of activity going on in sort of sampling, but are we sampling in the same way? Are we analyzing in the same way? If we're all disparate, we won't get to our conclusions, but if we're all working to a common protocol, a common target, then I think that will be a tremendous achievement. And that's one of the next steps of the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. So here it is. It's 176 pages. It has more than 900 images, 50 maps. It's full of interesting stuff. I've read it, I don't know how many times, even though I read it, I wrote part of it. But it's fascinating. It really is tremendous. I should say that the PDF version, the digital version of this is free. You can download it today. There are 2 websites here. at the Global Biodiversity and our website. You can just go there and you can download the PDF. There's a high resolution version and there's a low resolution version, which is still great. You can buy it actually, yeah, which will help us produce the next one maybe. It's only 25 euros, okay? We're not making money out of this. It's purely to cover some administrative costs. And if you just go to this website, search for this title, and they'll send it to you, okay? As we mentioned, 2016 is a year of the Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas. There will be other launch events all over the planet that talk already in Australia, in the US, in Brazil. We'll also do something in Europe. And so there'll be a lot of events and a lot of opportunities to see and talk about this. However, I think it's worth stressing that this is not the end, actually. If you look at the back of this atlas, you'll see that it's one of a series of soil atlases that we produce, and we are continuing to produce. There's no copyright restriction on this. You can copy, take, use the information. And the idea is that you use it for teaching, you use it for policy assessments, for briefings. You use the information that's in here. And also it's a tremendous source for awareness raising. And I talked about the astronaut thing, but when you start showing kids the pictures of the soil mites or earthworms close up, it's impressive and you get them hooked. In the past, from our various atlases, we've done a number of sort of spin-off products, happy families, top trumps, whatever you want to do it here. But also educational material, wall charts, videos, calendars, puzzles. There's a wealth of material in here that people can use to develop their. Importantly, awareness raising is linked to language. Okay, we try to translate our atlases to other language versions. If anybody feels like they want to help in translating this to whatever language you want, come and let me know. And we will also publish EPUB and Kindle versions of this, so you don't have to download 2.5 kilogram publication. And if you have any other ideas on how you'd like to use the information, just let me know. So I have to say thank you very much also to the editorial board for their patience. We did bombard them at time and put some pressure on them, but I think they responded. But also to the other 100 or so people who contributed to this atlas. That's a very impressive, and it was a nice collaborative exercise. So, just to let you know, soil biodiversity, it's useful, it's fragile, it's beautiful, it's overlooked, needs more resources to help us understand it. And I think from these pictures, it's clear that it helps in awareness raising. Thank you very much for your attention.